Hi everyone, welcome to my video. I appreciate you all tuning in. Please remember, hit the like button below. I'd appreciate that immensely. This is a follow-up video to my recommendations for 35mm film cameras for the beginners. I had mentioned in there about film latitude and understanding film latitude. So I wanted to come back and touch base on what film latitude is for those who are unfamiliar with the term, or who have never shot film. This is strictly for beginners. It's just a slight, it'll just be just a little slight tutorial on what film latitude is. Okay, first what we need to understand is what the latitude is. You know, it's a range, okay? So the human eye, and I'll put up a little thing over here. The human eye, they say, that the scientists say our latitude for a healthy human eye is 50,000, meaning that from the darkest point to the brightest point, at the brightest point we're seeing 50,000 times brighter than that darkest point. So we have a 50,000 latitude for the human eye. Okay, that's what it means. Just a very simple way of looking at latitude and the human eye. So film has a latitude also. We'll call film, you know, we'll say it has its own eye. So this is Tri-X S400. This is considered a wide latitude film by photographers. It's black and white film. Black and white film has a wider latitude than color film. I'll get into that later. But the 400, they consider a wide film. They say it has that its latitude is 500 from the darkest point to the brightest point. 500 times brighter than that darkest point the film is going to see. Now there used to be a plus X from Kodak. You can no longer get that, which bums me out because I always shot with the Kodak. I like the Tri-X because I like the graininess of it. So if you're shooting street photography, for me the Tri-X works wonders. But since the Plus X is no longer available, which I like to use too for different applications, sometimes street photography also, it works well for street photography. The Ilford FP4 is basically the same characteristics as the Tri-X Plus, okay? So when a photographer looks at the latitude of a film, you know, we don't want to look at it in terms of ratios, right? I mean, we want to be able to apply it. It has to be applied knowledge to the camera. So photographers like to call that ratio or break that ratio down into f-stops, okay? So they call the Tri-X 400 a 9-stop film, whereas the Ilford FP4 would be a 7-stop film, okay? I'm going to put the info right there, and we'll look at it and we'll see why they call the Tri-X 500 and why the Ilford 700. Now, if you look at this to the side here, right? Okay, so we open up one stop. That's 2 times the light, right? Now, remember, I said this is a 500 ratio film, okay? So now we're at 2 times the light. We open it up another stop, we're at 4 times the light. We open it at 3 stops, we're at 8 times the light. 4 stops, 16 times the light, right? Now we're looking at the chart here. So by the time you get down to 9 stops, you're at 512. So you're pretty close to the 500 that this is rated at, right? So this is why, I'm sorry, that's the wrong film. Excuse me. So that is why the 400 is called a 9-stop film, okay? Now you can do the same for the Ilford. And you just go down. Ilford's rated at 125, okay? So if you go down the chart here and you get to 128, you're at 7 stops. So that's basically how the latitude is rated in f-stops. I mean, this is just some general knowledge of your latitude and how the film is rated, okay? For all the beginners out there who don't understand, I just wanted to put this out there. I think this video should be done and explained concisely, but very clearly and extremely broken down to its simplest forms, so anyone breaking into film can get a clear understanding of what's going on. Okay, so what we need to understand when we talk about film latitude, I said it has 9 stops, this film here, right? Now, if you're filming a scene, what we call A high contrast scene would be anything 7 stops or above, and that's basically when you're going to have to start worrying about your film latitude, because a low contrast scene, which would be 3 stops or less, you're going to be able to squeeze it all in onto a film such as this, or even onto the Ilford. Okay, so I'll put that there too, so you can get a quick look at that. That's what I said. That the film latitude for a the high contrast scene is rated at 7 stops or above, where you can see that could be an issue. This is only rated at 7 stops. So a scene rated over 7 stops, you're going to lose detail somewhere. Okay. This is rated at 9 stops. 9 stops. Okay, so if you're over 9 stops in a high contrast scene, you're going to lose detail. And there's going to be many times when a scene is high contrast. A way to figure out if you're in a high contrast scene, or an easy way to understand that you're in a high contrast scene, is if you have bright skies and deep shadows, and you're seeing this, and say you have a model standing in maybe a little bit in the shadows, but maybe on a sandy beach or in a field, let's say, okay? And you got some shadows on the ground, you have your model, and you have a nice cloudy, let's say it's not even sunny, but just a bright sky with some poofy clouds hanging in it. And your object, just for this photo, would be to get some of the clouds in, get your model in, get the ground shadows in as much as you can. You want a nice rounded picture, say, okay? Now the way to figure out the contrast of this scene is to take an integrated reading, okay? I know this may sound crazy, but what you do is you just take your meter, you meter off the brightness of the sky. Let's say it says f22, okay? And then you meter off the shadows, and you get f2. So if you start counting down from 22 down to f2, where are we at? We're at 7 stops. Let me see, I might have a camera near me that wouldn't really show. I'm sorry, I'm out of frame here. Let's see. 16. I don't think I have one stop down to 22 to give a very... Okay, I do. I have one camera here. I have a Minolta here, which I could probably show. So, like I said, say you were at f22. I'll try to show that if I can. You got your f22, right? Okay, so then you just start counting down your stops. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 by the time you hit 2. All right, so let's say, for sake of argument here, just for this example, you're using your Ilford f4, which is a 7-stop film. Great, you have 7 stops on this high contrast scene. It's only 7 stops. You can get everything you want in on this film, right? You should be, right? But okay, let's say you're like, okay, well, where would it's f22 and the shadows are at 2. Maybe I should shoot in the middle, you know? Let's go somewhere in the middle. So let's say, you know, you're going to go to, let's say, 5.6, and you shoot it. Picture comes back, the shadows are blocked out on the model's face, you know, the clouds are in, you know, because you have room towards the highlights, which I should have talked about before I went into this segment. You have enough room towards the highlights so the clouds come in, but towards the shadows you don't have enough room to expose 3 stops. You just block the shadows out. So now I'm going to backtrack a little bit here, because I may have confused people with this. Film latitude is not rated the same in each direction, okay? And this is the point I'm making with that little example I gave. Now, this f7 film here, we have much more latitude towards the highlights than the shadows with the black and white film. And same said for the T-Max 400. Here, we're going to have 5 stops towards the towards the highlights, and only 2 stops towards the shadows. Same said with the T-Max, except you're going to have 7 stops towards the highlights and 2 towards the shadows, right? So what that means is, you know, you could go over, you know, 2-3 stops towards your highlights if you needed to, and your highlights are going to fall in. I mean, up to 5 with the Ilford and 7 with the with the Kodak, but you only have 2 stops with the shadows. So if your shadows exceed the 2 stops, you're going to lose detail in your shadows. I mean, you're going to block it out. I hope I'm making myself clear with this. So we know you can get 2 stops with the shadows. We know we're looking at a 7-stop scene, right? I said 22 on the sky, 2 in the shadows, okay? Now, what we know from the information I gave you, this film can handle 5 stops towards the highlights, 2 towards the shadows. So what does that tell you? Well, for my example, when I said if you shoot at 5.6, you're going to block all the shadows out, you just knew you blew the shadows, right? You underexpose for the shadows. So the correct exposure would be to expose for the shadows, because what happens? We expose for the shadows, we're at 2, okay? We have 2 stops of underexposure for the shadows. So we move it up 1, 2. That puts us at F4, okay? That would be the proper exposure for the shadows. Now your model's face is going to come in clear. What about the clouds in the sky and then the bright zone, right? So we're at 2 in the shadow, and it's F22. We count up, so we can count up from here how many stops. If you just turned your lens, I'm sorry, maybe you can't see that there. Now if you just turn your lens up, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at 22. So you're there. You're there. 5 stops of towards the highlights of exposure here. So if we opened it, I mean we closed it down to, or opened it up, I'm sorry, to F2, closed it down for the shadows to F4, 2 stops right at the limit of the Ilford FP4. But that Ilford its eyesight can handle the shadows at 2 stops under exposure and the highlights at 5. So everything is fitting in there, if you can follow what I'm saying. I will put up the info for what I just said about the highlights for 5 and the shadows for 2. I'll put that right there so you can just read it quickly. Now, what I'm going to suggest is, because this is just an introductory into film latitude, I'm going to suggest buy a book. You can find them cheap. You know, on eBay, you can grab a book for $5 on film and exposure and read through it. This should give you a basic understanding of what is going on with film latitude. And my other suggestion, now this is a suggestion. Everybody is, I mean, you can do whatever you want to do, that is up to you. So I'm suggesting this as a longtime film shooter. Pick a film, such as I love this, as I said, for street photography, and use it. Just use this film. I mean, if it takes you 20 rolls until you understand this film completely, then shoot 20 rolls of it until you understand it completely. Once you have a real good grasp on this, I'm not saying not to shoot anything else, but I'm saying if you're going to shoot, you know, say you grab 2 rolls of film, always grab a roll of this, or the film that you're going to use most often, shoot with that, and then maybe try another film. But I suggest always shooting with 1 film until you have a complete understanding of that film. For me, as I said, it was the Plus X and the TX, but I can no longer get the Plus X, so the Ilford, which is basically the same, I go with the Ilford. I hope this was not confusing. I tried to be concise. I know I may have jumped ahead slightly, but I tried coming back to touch base on where I was going with the conversation. Now, as I said, an integrated reading, if you think you are in a high contrast scene, measure the highlight, measure the shadow, count in between how many stops you are. That's an easy way, easy way to figure out how many stops you are, and if your film can handle all the detail. If your film can handle all the detail, that is fine. You as a photographer decide what is important to you in that scene, and that's what you expose for. Now, there are many times you don't care about the background. You want to blur it. You're just shooting a portrait. So the background don't matter if you're in a high contrast scene. You're going to blur it all out and just get the model in. So yeah, then you have no problems. But there are times, and this is why I bring up the latitude of the film and understanding it. There are times you are going to want to get as much in as possible. Say you have a beautiful vista behind you and your model leaning against a fence and you want to grab that vista. Just say you're in Wyoming or somewhere just grand sweeping, and you want to capture where your model is standing, and you're in a high contrast scene and you're shooting black and white. You want to know the latitude in that film and what you can squeeze in and how you can accomplish that. My suggestion is, in a high contrast scene, the right way is to expose for the shadows. Expose for your shadows. It's not the only way, as I said, because your eye is different what you want to bring into your film. But if you want to get that sweeping vista and your model in, and you can squeeze it into your film, you know, get the clouds or the mountains and everything, you know, and the model leaning against the fence, definitely expose for those shadows. Push it to the 2-stop limit, and your film will have no problem handling it. But there will be times, this is not digital, you know, film is a different animal. You are going to lose some highlights or some shadows every now and then, depending on the scene you are in. So basically, that's all I wanted to state today. I just wanted to touch base on film latitude because I had mentioned that in my 35mm film recommendation, camera recommendations for beginners. And this, of course, is just for beginners here who know nothing about film latitude. I hope I didn't confuse anybody. If I did, please leave a message below and let me know that I confused you. I will try to clarify in the comments, or maybe shoot another video and address any issues others may have had from this video here, what you may not have understood. I can come back and touch base on that if you wish. I suggest, you know, learning about the film, as I said, understand the stops, you know, what the film latitude is. This is considered a wide latitude film. So, you know, this is how photographers call or rate a film. You know, they'll say it's a wide latitude or narrow latitude. And that's where I wanted to touch base right now before I sign off, was color film has approximately 3 stops. Approximately, somewhere in there. It's very finicky. So with color film, you have to be very careful with your exposure. You may get 2 stops over and 1.5 under. But that is all I wanted to do and talk about today. So I'm sorry, that's all I wanted to state today. I hope to talk to you next time. If there's any questions, please ask. If this was confusing, tell me it was confusing. As I said, I'll try to come back or just answer it in the comments below. So take care, all. I'll talk to you all next time. And I was trying to put the camera away, but my hand was getting in the video there. Sorry, guys and girls. All right, take care, folks. Talk to you next time. Bye.